Everyone. I'd like to say hello and hope you're having a great morning this morning. We've got, want to thank Donnie Squirrel and CCO for being here today. We've got an excellent presenter in Mr. Chance Adams, and I'll tell you a little bit more about Chance in a second, but I'd like to ask everyone, I've got a book here that was given to me from a gentleman from Oaks Indian Mission, and we'll just go to the Lord in a quick prayer, if you will. Lord, we give thanks for your loving stronghold. Your strength is the power that holds us, that nothing, neither death nor life, neither disease nor despair, neither divorce nor distance, neither depression nor disbelief will disconnect us from your love. Thank you, Jesus. In your strong words, we take refuge and live in peace. Amen. So I say, wado to our Creator. But today, and it's something that's been very interesting to a lot of us. I met Chance Adams in the first 100 days of Chief Hoskin and mine's tenure in the offices that we are, and we were starting a lot. If you followed along with the Cherokee Nation, we started a lot of different initiatives. One of those that we were looking at the time was a sort of a wellness initiative, and we come along many different paths, and we want to get this right. So, and then along comes the pandemic, of course, and it's brought wellness right back up to the front. I don't think anybody's health is ever a matter of the mind later. It's always should be a matter of today. What can we do today to take those baby steps? And what we're looking at today is taking you back to your roots and giving you more of a Native American perspective on what does this modern disease do to us? How can we combat this thing and so forth? So Chance is a wellness warrior. I would like to call him that. He's somebody that's done a lot of work with other tribal nations. They've done great work, been very in-depth, but you know, and when a lot of times people look at somebody and they've worked so deeply within an organization, Chance can also come back and work with the beginners. It's not you know, he can run the full gamut of folks, from those that are just starting to those that are looking, that have kind of hit that plateau and looking for something new. So this is a way that we can start today, and I think today is a special day, especially Tribal Council is doing their council work today, and today in Rules Committee there is a legislative act for health and wellness and behavioral health that would actually pull out about 7% of our third-party revenue and put that in for capital improvements, for operational improvements and things in that wellness and behavioral health category. And we know that the pandemic is going to be continuing long after we have taken hold of it and kind of got vaccinated and done all those things. But, you know, we're going to see a lot of issues that are unintended consequences from this pandemic. And one way that we can do that is take that holistic approach. So Mr. Chance Adams, folks, I give you Chance Adams. Thank you, sir.
Hey, Deputy Warner, I appreciate the comments. And man, I'm excited. There's a lot of great things going on with the Cherokee Nation right now, and it's a very exciting time to be a part of this. So I'm going to share my screen, and hopefully you guys can see this. Get in my presenter view. I'm going to jump into presenter view for a little bit. I will not be able to see the chat, but if you guys want to drop some comments or anything, and I will save some time at the end for some Q&A. So if you have anything like that, just keep in mind. Let's see here. Here we go. Let me get this dropped in here. All right. Can everybody see this?
Yes, it's there.
All is well. Okay. And you can hear me. Good deal.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. And we don't have a chat feature, but we do have Q&A, and I can help monitor that, as well as Abraham Bearpaw, who is in our department as well.
Okay, yeah, very well. So like I said, we'll save a little bit of time at the end for some Q&A. If you have any questions, just feel free to jot those down and bring them up here in a little bit. So, well, good morning. I want to thank you all for joining. It really brightens my day anytime I get to speak about things I'm passionate about, and wellness is very high on that list. So again, I appreciate each of you joining, and I hope I can provide some useful knowledge and tools to help you live a healthier and more fulfilling life. Many tribes and tribal cultures, including the Cherokees, hold the belief to keep the 7 generations both ahead of us and behind us in mind for everything we do. And when doing so and comparing and contrasting the more traditional lifestyles of our ancestors to that of today, the differences become pretty stark, just as the diseases and other things that ail us. So 7 out of 10 Americans will die of chronic disease. And today we're going to explore and dig in and take a hard look at why that may be. So look, first, let's start by defining chronic disease. So what is chronic disease? According to the Center for Disease Control, these are conditions that last 1 year or more and require ongoing medical attention or limit activities of daily living, or both. So taking a look at the leading causes of death in the United States, we have heart disease, 650,000 deaths per year, cancer, unintentional injuries, respiratory disease, stroke and CVD, which is cardiovascular disease, Alzheimer's, diabetes, flu and pneumonia, kidney disease, and suicide. We have a couple asterisks over to the side because it's been, pretty crazy last 12, 14 months. COVID-19, as of yesterday, I think we had a little over 503,000 deaths in the United States. So that would put that up above, just behind cancer. So a third leading cause of death. A 2016 study from Johns Hopkins identified the unintentional medical error or misdiagnosis or any sort of thing that happens within these health systems that could cause, an abnormality in treatment. And what they understood and extrapolated some data over several years was that they found that 251 deaths were as a result of medical error, which would actually put that behind COVID, so competing for 4th place in the leading causes of death. But anyhow, 7 of these 10 are considered chronic diseases, and they account for 2.1 million deaths per year. Now, this is not an exhaustive list of chronic disease. This could also include things like alcoholism, arthritis, asthma, tobacco use, hypertension, overweight and obesity, oral health, osteoporosis, mental health, etc. 6 in 10 adults in the United States have chronic disease. 4 in 10 adults have 2 or more chronic diseases, so comorbidities, which has been a big driver in some of the COVID deaths and the horrific things that have happened in this country over the past year. The leading causes of death and disability and leading drivers of the United States, $3.5 trillion in annual healthcare costs. So we're also spending a ton of money, treating some of these symptoms that manifest as chronic disease. So this isn't just a Cherokee issue, though. It's not just an Oklahoman issue or an American issue. Other countries are screaming for help as their assimilation to the Western diet is wreaking havoc on their populations. Most of these, third world countries and countries, with the exception of the United States, lack a lot of resources and even the healthcare infrastructure to handle this and are frantically looking for solutions. India, for example, has tried to lobby Pepsi to do something about their rising prevalence of diseases that Indians have identified as being correlated to Pepsi's entry into India's markets. China is also seeing an exponential rise in chronic disease, especially diabetes, as the country adopts a more Western and American diet. So touching on a little bit of chronic disease and COVID-19, among the most significant risk factors for hospitalization and death in COVID-19 are the presence of diet-related chronic diseases such as hypertension, heart disease, diabetes, and obesity. Nearly 3 out of 4 American adults are overweight or obese. Half have diabetes or prediabetes. A 2018 study found that only 12% of Americans are metabolically healthy, which is defined as having optimal levels of blood markers. This means 88% of Americans have some form of metabolic disease. And diving a little bit deeper on some of that, we looked at Italy, had 99% of COVID-19 deaths were those with comorbidities or elderly with an average age of 81. The life expectancy in Italy is only 82. Over in England, they had they measured A1C, which is the measure of average blood sugar over time, which is usually around 2 to 3 months, and found that was a direct correlate of increased COVID-19 deaths. In China, elevated blood glucose, which is sugar in the blood, was linked to a 10-fold increased likelihood of dying from COVID-19. So we know chronic disease is an enormous problem, and it's killing Cherokees, Oklahomans, and Americans at an alarming rate, and its prevalence is increasing exponentially year over year. So real quick, before we move forward, let's define wellness. According to the World Health Organization, wellness is a state of complete physical and mental health and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. I'm going to have to agree, and this is extremely helpful, but I also borrowed this model from CrossFit that helps to explain things a little bit better. The sickness, wellness, fitness continuum. You see sickness on the left and fitness on the right, and we have wellness right here in the middle. For this purpose, we'll call wellness the absence of disease, and we'll reserve fitness, which could be called super wellness, as the action or actions taken to improve or build upon our own level of wellness. So it's eating the proper foods, getting the right exercise, those types of things. Adversely, you could eat, junk food, be extremely sedentary, not treat yourself right, and that's going to reduce your wellness as well. So this model provides measurements that are known risk factors of chronic disease and manifestations of hyperinsulinemia or too much sugar in the bloodstream, and I'll explain that in the upcoming slides. So if you notice a little box on the top left, based on measurements of blood pressure, body fat, bone density, triglycerides, HDL and LDL cholesterol, HbA1c, which is glycated hemoglobin, muscle mass, and etc. Most of these can be tested by your doctor or provider, and if you're not having them, I'd recommend you include those in any wellness check or annual physical, especially if you're utilizing any of the Cherokee clinics or IHS facilities. And believe me, your doctor would love to hear you inquire about these types of things. And if they don't, it might be time to find a new doctor. But this model can also apply to physical endeavors like walking, running, jogging, etc. The average person walks about 3 miles per hour. So let's say you go for a 3-mile walk. Okay, 3 miles per hour should take you 1 hour to approximately 1 hour to walk that 3 miles. If you couldn't make that distance, or it took you a lengthy amount of time to complete the task, say 2 hours, this could be a sign of sickness according to this particular continuum. Conversely, a sign of fitness could be anything from a relatively fast walking time, anything less than an hour, to a world record 5K, which currently is like 12.5 minutes for men and a little over 14 minutes for women, if you were curious. The box on the bottom right states CrossFit's assumption, and that is that if everything we can measure about health will conform to this continuum, then it seems that sickness, wellness, and fitness are different measures of a single quality, which is health. Now, if we can agree on that, then we can kind of flip this wellness continuum on its side, extrapolate it over the lifespan, and then we understand, we kind of get a good picture of health. As we move throughout our life, what are we doing? What actions are we taking to either promote or deteriorate our own health and wellness? And we're going to dig a little bit deeper into that and look at the problems we see in this country, kind of the problems we see within medicine and the healthcare system, and what we can actually do about it as individuals. So now we're going to shift gears a little bit and get into a little bit of the science. And I'll start by giving credit where credit's due, as this piece has gone completely unchallenged since its publication and has formed the general understanding of the things I'll describe from here on out. In 1989, in the Archives of Internal Medicine, Dr. Norman Kaplan, a cardiologist out of Dallas area, published a study that causally linked hyperinsulinemia, which is too much sugar in the bloodstream, to hypertension, glucose intolerance, upper body obesity, and visceral fat, which is fat around the abdomen and belly, and hypertriglyceridemia, which is high triglycerides, otherwise known as Syndrome X or metabolic syndrome. However, most institutions still point the finger at obesity as a main driver of chronic disease and other ailments. I'm kind of the point or of the understanding that obesity is a marker of disease and not necessarily the cause. And a lot of the things that I've seen in my time working with tribal members and people in the general population would mirror this. And here's why. In our culture and in this country, we take an exclusive view of obesity and metabolic dysfunction. This is a Venn diagram of the entire United States population. 30% obese, which is a BMI over 30, 70% normal weight, which would be a BMI under 30. The standard mantra of doctors and dietitians in the institutes of medicine and our Surgeon General and National Institutes of Health and the White House and Congress and the food industry is the following. 80% of those obese individuals, these 60 million people, are sick. We're fat, they're sick, and they're sick because they're fat. And if we'd only diet and exercise, we'd be able to solve this problem. Now, I don't necessarily agree with that, and here is why. 80% of 30% are metabolically ill. This is true, but that means that 20% are not. This 20% is metabolically healthy. The clinical name for this group is MHO, metabolically healthy obese. They'll live a completely normal life and die at a completely normal age. Even have normal length telomeres, which are the ends of the chromosomes that determine how fast a cell dies, thusly how fast we die. Conversely, and this is the important part, 40% of the normal weight population had the exact same diseases as those that are obese. Normal weight people get heart disease, cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, hypertension, lipid problems, and dementia as well. They get it at a lower body weight, true. But if normal weight people are getting these diseases, then it can't just be about behavior. It starts to look a lot more like exposure. This looks more like like maybe the flu or cholera, or for that matter, COVID-19. So this can't just be about behavior. This is about some exposure that everyone, including normal weight people, are exposed to. In fact, if we do the math, it turns out there are more thin sick people in this country than there are fat and sick people. And when you do the math on all of it, turns out that more than half the US population, 130 million people, are sick. 52% of Americans, and the majority don't even know it. Personally, I think this explains why we've seen so many quote unquote healthy people succumb to COVID-19. They weren't necessarily healthy to begin with. They had underlying metabolic disease and weren't even aware. Statistically, this is a bigger problem than even COVID-19, which we all know is a national and global emergency, and has disrupted the lives of thousands across the Cherokee Reservation and hundreds of millions throughout America and across the globe. And the real kicker is medicine and some of our current health systems are helpless in addressing these issues. Now, I can't take credit for this Venn diagram. It was borrowed directly from Dr. Robert Lustig, who was an endocrinologist at University of California, San Francisco. And he's also probably the most prolific researcher of sugar, processed foods, and the harms they cause that I'm aware of. And he's also responsible for this next piece I'm about to share with you. The hateful eight, or grateful eight if you're following a real food diet. When sugar and other toxic carbohydrates interact with the cell, these things can happen. We have 8 subcellular pathologies that belie chronic metabolic disease. So let's say we ingest a bunch of processed foods, high in carbohydrates, they're highly processed, maybe got a lot of sugar in them. These things take place: glycation, oxidation or oxidative stress, mitochondrial dysfunction, insulin resistance, membrane instability, inflammation, methylation, and autophagy, which is when the cells start to eat each other, basically. Now, none of these are diseases themselves. There is no IDC-11 code. The IDC is the International Disease Classification Code. So if you go in and you're diagnosed with anything in a healthcare setting, you're going to get an IDC code. So these aren't even really recognized by most healthcare systems because they're something that happens, like I said, subcellular. So these are taking place and interactions are happening among the cell, and most of our treatment in healthcare systems come after the fact. So, we can treat symptoms that, manifest after cells have been exposed to sugar or processed foods or other things, but we can't really do much other than eliminate sugar and processed foods from our diet to keep those things from happening to the cell. So let me back up one slide. There is no IDC-11 code. There's also no pill, meaning this is not druggable. So there's no fix to this. We can treat symptoms, but we cannot cure these diseases without proper nutrition. Exercise, and specifically high-intensity exercise, addresses 5 of these issues. Nutrition addresses all 8. So everything we put in our mouth can and will cause one of these things to happen. Therefore, every bite or drink we consume can be identified as something that is either promoting our sickness or promoting our health. And we're going to explore what some of those things might be. There's my next slide. I got a little ahead of myself. So the roots of the problem. The problem is simple as it only has 2 parts: sedentarism and excess carbohydrates, particularly sugar and processed or refined carbohydrates. Let's take a look at what a traditional Cherokee diet probably looked like. Not getting all my slides here. Here we go. I had a lot of mostly hunter-gatherers and agrarians eating real food. The typical or traditional Cherokee diet consists of plants, fruits, and vegetables, such as corn, beans, squash, pumpkins, watermelon, sweet potatoes, peaches, etc., and game meats, a lot of deer, bear, fish, wild hogs, and things of that nature. Now, I have combed Google and the internet and the web as far as I can take it, trying to find the macronutrient and how these things kind of played out. And the best I can find is it's basically 50-50, 50% plants and vegetables and 50% meats. And I think that's probably relatively accurate. It seems to be pretty congruent with a lot of other tribes and cultures. You know, they were relatively more primitive, you know, prior to European assimilation. But it's also important to understand that when hunting, our ancestors believed in harvesting older, more mature game meat, as they often had accumulated more fat that could be rendered and used to cook with and served for other uses. So our ancestors knew hundreds of years ago the importance of fat in our diets. You know, it wasn't until like the 70s, 1970s, that, you know, we had this kind of this aggressive attack on saturated fat, and we started pulling saturated fat out of foods, and, you know, we replaced them with sugar, and then we saw this, you know, exponential growth of chronic disease prevalence, you know, over the last, you know, 40, 70, 60 years. So moving on, the hunter-gatherer was healthy, no doubt about that. A gentleman named Weston Price noted an almost complete absence of tooth decay and dental deformities among Native Americans who lived as their ancestors did. They had broad faces, straight teeth, and fine physiques, he was on record as saying. Skeletal remains of a group of natives around Vancouver that Price studied were similar, showing a virtual absence of tooth decay, arthritis, and any other kind of bone deformity. Tuberculosis, which was actually really prominent then, was non-existent among natives who ate as their ancestors had done, and the women gave birth with ease. The explorers consistently described the Native Americans as tall and well-formed. A group of natives out of Texas, the explorer Cabeza de Vaca, wrote, "The men could run after a deer for an entire day without resting, without apparent fatigue. One man, near 7 feet in stature, runs down a buffalo on foot and slays it with his knife or lance as he runs by its side. The Indians were difficult to kill. De Vaca reports on an Indian traversed by an arrow. He does not die, but recovers from his wounds. The men went stark naked." Getting a little ahead of myself on that one. But anyway, he just goes on to talk about how the prowess and the statures and the physical capabilities of, you know, Native Americans during, you know, historically and traditionally. And there was also a little comment of, and a couple weeks ago, we were talking about the cold water, and one of the CCO presentations, I believe it was Abraham that gave that, and we're talking about, you know, going to water and different things like that. And then there was a comment that De Vaca made about they would go out in the early dawn to take a bath and break the ice with their body. And so those are, you know, if you're interested in the cold therapy stuff, there's a guy named Wim Hof that's kind of brought that back to the forefront and you know, some of the popular mainstream media. So check that out, because there's a lot of cultural relevance to that as well. So moving on, we're going to take a look at the standard American diet. Looking at the standard American diet, it becomes easy to see where the issues lie. Unfortunately, let me back up. Let's compare and contrast this. So the traditional Cherokee diet has zero processed food. It's high in saturated fat and protein, and relative to today's terms, very low in carbohydrates. You know, we're eating a lot of, you know, 50% plants, fruits, and vegetables, but it wasn't as processed. You're not having the nutrient. It was a much more nutrient dense food for sure, but just as a whole, we were ingesting lower amounts of total carbohydrates. So real quick look at the standard American diet, also known as the SAD diet. Refined and processed foods at 63%, mostly consisting of soft drinks, packaged snacks like chips, desserts, or desserts, and processed foods like you know, breads and snack cakes and you know, things of that nature. And then we have animal-based foods at 25% and plant-based foods around 12%. Unfortunately, half of the plant-based calories, 6% of those come from French fries. So that means that only 6% of America's calories are coming from health-promoting fruits and vegetables, whole grains, nuts, and seeds as of today. There's a good reason we abbreviate the standard American diet to SAD. The standard American diet leads to standard American diseases that lead to standard American deaths. So moving forward, standard American diet, high in sugar. It's led to 88% of our population that are living with metabolic disease, majority of which don't even know it. High prevalence of chronic diseases, premature death, and millions of years of life lost. So we're looking at, we ask ourselves, why no sugar and why no processed foods? Well, 75% of processed foods contain added sugars, and often these are renamed or hidden in nutrition labels. And I actually tried to fit this into my slide, but the list was too long to include. So Verta Health published an article titled Secret Sugars, which is listed 56 different names that, different companies have found a way to place sugar into foods and call them a little bit something else so it doesn't throw up any red flags. So, read your labels, double check everything. And usually if you have something that's really low fat, but it shows a high in carbs, it's typically sugar. And when a load of sugar enters the bloodstream, it's processed by our liver and it turns to fat. Some goes out as a risk factor for heart disease and obesity, and some sticks around in the liver and becomes risk factors for fatty liver disease and diabetes. So the next question we have to ask ourselves is, okay, well, what can we do about it? And to turn the ship around, we need to spread the word about whole food, plant-based diet, which is the only diet that's been scientifically shown to prevent and reverse chronic diseases like heart disease and type 2 diabetes. So how do we go about that? Well, we can eat meat and vegetables, nuts and seeds, some fruit, little starch, and no sugar. And again, this was lifted straight from CrossFit, but I haven't seen anybody put it in such eloquent and direct terms. And I think that really hits the nail on the head right there with how we need to treat ourselves and the foods and types of things we need to eat. Let's go through a couple nutrition rules to remember. We're going to eat as little sugar as possible, eat real foods with ingredients we know, limit food intake to not eat excess. A calorie is not a calorie. What that calorie is made of matters. We're going to eat healthy fats and shop the perimeter of the grocery store. And remember that if it had a face or came from the earth, it's probably good for us. And I want to touch a little bit on nutrition and mental health too, because I think there's obviously a lot of correlation and overlap there. And it's unfortunate, but the majority of medicine in this culture in America treats mental and physical health as separate components of the body. And as natives, we've known for millennia that simply isn't the case. Yet here's where we stand today. 1 in 6 Americans take psychiatric medication. Depression remains #1 cause of disability in the U.S. and globally. 322 million are reporting as being depressed globally, and that was an 18.4% increase from 2005 to 2015. Anxiety accounts for 264 million cases globally, bipolar 60 million, and schizophrenia 21 million. So, even when medications help, we still deal with the social stigma, the emotional dulling, sexual dysfunction, tremors, weight gain, and insulin resistance. And I have those asterisks because they're directly related to our nutrition as well. Let's talk about that. Nutrition roots of mental illness. And what we see is there's correlation, and several studies have shown this. Nutritional psychiatry is still at a pretty early stages of understanding. There's doctors out there like Dr. Ede, can't remember her first name right now, but she's done some amazing work, and I'll try to share some of this later on in the realm of nutritional psychiatry. And some of the things that she's found was that foods that raise blood sugar or insulin levels, promote oxidation, promote inflammation, are low in nutrients like processed foods, high in anti-nutrients like processed foods, and foods that damage the gut lining and aggravate the immune system are also root causes of some mental illness. So we ask ourselves, what can we do, beyond that? And again, borrowing this from CrossFit, world-class fitness in 100 words. Eat meat and vegetables, nuts and seeds, some fruit, little starch, and no sugar. Keep intake to levels that will support exercise, but not body fat. Practice and train major lifts 5 or 6 days a week, mix those elements, and learn to regularly play new sports. So to sort of summarize, once anything becomes processed, it becomes less beneficial to us, whether that be the foods we eat, our relationships with others, etc. In closing, I'll borrow from CrossFit once again, as I believe they've laid out the best plan for achieving fitness, which you've seen in the World Class Fitness in 100 Words. Now, it's a little bit difficult, you know, with COVID-19 looming overhead, but there are resources available. I know the Cherokee Nation and the Marcoma Fitness Center, they put out on their Facebook page, they put some at-home workouts and some gym workouts that you guys can do to, you know, to keep yourselves active and proactive in your health and things like that. But I think the one thing I really want you to take away from today is to cut your sugar. You've heard me talk a little bit about Dr. Lustig, the endocrinologist from UCSF, and I shared this with Deputy Warner before. There was this guy did a study last year, and he took his pediatric patients that were, you know, these kids that were, you know, all adolescents, and they all had biomarkers of metabolic disease. You know, they were seeing him for a reason. And one of the things that they did was they catered these kids meals for like 10 days, and they took out all of their added sugars. They replaced them with starches. So they wasn't necessarily giving them like good foods. It wasn't like salads or anything like that, but, you know, maybe a turkey hot dog with a bun and all those things. And one of the things that they noticed is over 9 days, every single participant that swapped out their added sugars for starches and eliminated those sugars saw improvement in their metabolic conditions and their metabolic biomarkers. And this happened within 9 days within these kids. So this is extremely potent stuff. You know, if you're consuming a diet right now that's high in processed foods, high in soft drinks, sodas, and things of that nature, and you cut that out, you're going to almost see immediate improvements in a lot of these biomarkers that, you know, we know are risk factors for, you know, metabolic disease and chronic disease and things of that nature. So I really encourage you to do that. If you need help, reach out. I'm here. There's other resources through Cherokee Nation Public Health. Tons of people out there willing to help and kind of steer us all in the right direction. I think, like I said, you know, this is an exciting time to be involved in some of these new initiatives, and I'm extremely excited. I think there's a ton of potential here, and, you know, honestly, I'm excited to hear more comments from members of the CCO and members of the, you know, the larger Cherokee citizenry to understand, you know, what your needs are and you know, how we can help moving forward. So, you know, with that, I'm going to kind of close this one out. And we'll open this up to some Q&A, and we'll go from there. I appreciate you guys tuning in.
What up, Chance? I appreciate it. This is Abraham Bearpaw.
How are you?
Pretty good. It's, you know, your presentation, it's alarming. You know, I mean, definitely, this is one thing that I struggle with. You know, and the one thing that you mentioned also, even if you do try to eat a balanced diet and make some of these lifestyle changes, there's hidden sugar and hidden salt and almost everything. And that's frustrating, you know, but, you know, I definitely think this is important. I think I'm excited, you know, that you put this information out there, you know, excited for our citizens to begin, you know, making some of these changes if they need to in their life. So we do have a couple questions. We have one from Tanya Proctor. She wants to know if dairy is hard on the native body for digestion.
You know, it's really hard to say. There's a lot of these things. And again, I'm not a doctor. I'm speaking in generalities. If you have some sort of underlying metabolic condition or chronic disease or something, and you start to make any changes, please consult with your physician. And, you know, they should be on board. Anytime you say, hey, I want to eat better, be healthier, they should be patting you on the back and cheering you on, you know, and supporting that any way they can. Now, when it comes to dairy, it's a little difficult to say. Now, I'm under the impression that most people are people that are lactose intolerant are actually the norm. We are the only mammals that continue to consume milk beyond weaning. So that's kind of a weird deal. And I don't really have any science behind that, but I will say this, it doesn't appear that we see the glycation problems from dairy for a lot of, for myself and a lot of the people that I've worked with in the past. Now, what I suggest is kind of doing an elimination type of diet. And I did this actually in prepping for this. And once we decided, hey, we're gonna put this together and get this on the schedule, I cut out sugar. My wife and I did this together. We cut out sugar for about 6 or 7 weeks. And once I started adding some things back, I noticed that like when I started drinking milk and some things again and kind of tested those things out, and I noticed myself getting, a little phlegmy and some things like that. So personally, I don't handle it very well, but one of the best ways to go about this is, eliminate some of the things that you think may be a problem. And then, once your body's kind of adjusted to that, you can slowly add some things back and kind of make those, decide for yourself if it's working for you or if it doesn't. There's a lot of similarities in this, amongst us, but there's also a lot of individual aspects as well. So it's important to understand what works for us as individuals. And I hope that we can just kind of give a good set of guidelines and principles to adhere to as we move forward and kind of figure this thing out for ourselves. Does that make sense? I hope that answered your question.
Oh, great. No, I appreciate it. Growing up, that's something that I heard, that a lot of natives were lactose intolerant. And growing up, I was always told I was lactose intolerant. I was tested later, found out that wasn't the case, but I know it is really prevalent. I drink Lactaid, just in case, because I do feel like lactose doesn't really agree with my body. But thank you for that information. We have another question from Aiden Sky Ramirez Tatum. He says, OCO, do you think that more tribally produced food and trying to encourage hunting and foraging might help with people knowing what's in their food more and having more connection to what we are eating?
Hey, 100%. I agree with that 100%. I think, one, it's going to help us become much more sustainable in the long term and not rely on it. Let me back up just a little bit. Let's be honest. A lot of us, not just here on the Cherokee reservation, but throughout Indian country, we're living in the middle of food deserts. So we don't really have access to a lot. We have access to a lot of the junk and the processed foods that we don't need. But any opportunity to bring real food and a sense of connection to that food back into our culture is certainly welcome, and I think that it can only be beneficial.
Great. I lived out in California for a while, and I do see out there they have a lot more, Whole Food stores, Sprouts, some of these supermarkets that only, have organic produce and, organically raised meats and these kind of things. So I would like to see more of that out here, but I know that the Cherokee Nation is working on our own processing, facilities for meat. So that's going to be exciting.
Yeah, extremely exciting. I can't wait to see, some of the things and the good things that come out of that program. That'll be amazing, actually.
So our next question or comment, she just says from Sylvia Soholt. She says, this information is so important for our wellness. I appreciate the SAD diet correlation to mental illness. Whole foods and plant-based diet can restore our balance. Thank you for sharing this Wellness Warrior presentation.
Hey, absolutely. I'm happy to be able to share some of this information. Like I said, it gets me excited, and I hope you guys got something out of it.
And then the next question we have, this is exactly, from Robert Gold, sorry. This is exactly what we preach at MSRC, which is Marcoma, the fitness center that the tribe operates. How do you suggest we expand our reach and connect with more communities?
Well, it's this is a step in the right direction. I think for the most part, I've been in Marcoma. I know a lot of the people over there. They do a great job. They're extremely passionate about what they do. So I want them to just continue what you're doing. As Deputy Warner opened this up with, there's some legislation being introduced. So hopefully that'll put some more muscle and steam behind some of the projects that are out there and create some new initiatives moving forward as well. So I think this is really like the beginning of a lot of new and exciting programs and opportunities that they're going to come to fruition throughout the Cherokee Reservation. And man, I think Marcoma's right there in the mix. So congrats to you guys.
Thank you. Actually this year, I've tried to take more responsibility on myself. This is the first year I'm going to grow some of my own food. So I understand the challenge. You know, it is challenging, especially for people who don't have maybe acreage outside of town. You know, Tahlequah, I do know that we have the farmers market, you know, and so we do have, you know, people who are interested in this, and I would like to see that community grow. So I do hear you when I say that we are probably at the beginning of, you know, getting these things going, but it is exciting to see things moving in the right direction.
Certainly.
And so our next question is, I want to say I appreciate you integrating science and emphasizing that obesity is a symptom or marker and not necessarily the cause of disease. I am a pre-medical student at college, and even in school, I see a lot of ignorance of this research.
Yeah, it's kind of unfortunate. I think, you know, it reminds me of a concept in hunting called target lock. You know, and I kind of experienced this through COVID, spent a lot more time outdoors and whatnot. And, you know, you're bow hunting and things like that. You're moving in, let's say you kind of have your target set on this animal, and you're sneaking in and trying to, you know, make the harvest and whatnot, but you miss out on maybe another animal that's a few yards away, and it, you know, blows the whole thing up. And I kind of feel like we're with that with our healthcare sometimes, is, you know, we get so focused on treating these symptoms and, you know, where the money and all these other things come into play. And that's our focus, that we miss the obvious. And the obvious is we've had these major changes in our food industry. Our food supply in this country is COVIDogenic, which means it's going, if you're eating the standard American diet, it's going to set you up to, you know, for major issues with things like microbes like the flu, COVID-19, and other things. So, you know, it's important that we get this right. And I think, you know, for the most part, in the health systems and institutions in this country is, you know, we're off the mark here. And, you know, hopefully they can come back. But, you know, if they don't, as Native tribes, you know, I think we need to flex a little bit of sovereignty and, you know, take the reins ourselves and move forward. But with a good understanding of where we're at, where we need to go, and really how to get there.
Widow, I appreciate that. Our next question from Charlie Barnowski. She said, reading the text is hard via her mobile device. Will the graphs and tables be available to print from anywhere, or can they be emailed?
I'm certain that somehow, some way between Abraham and myself, we can probably make that happen or make those available. And Abraham, I guess you and I can discuss that, you know, shortly. And
this, I do want to let everybody know that this presentation will be put on YouTube through the CCO channel there. Donnie always puts the presentations on there.
Yeah, and before we move forward, Charlie, if you really want those, or, you know, you need them soon or something like that, feel free to shoot me an email. You can reach me at my personal one at chance_adams@yahoo. Shoot one to that, and I'll hook you up.
Great. We have a question here from Aaron. Do you have specifics on new programs or initiatives coming in the future?
Aaron, I do not. I expect over the next couple of months, with some of the, you know, new things going on, that there'll be a lot of opportunities and new announcements coming forward.
Great. And that looks like all of the questions that we have so far. Donnie, did you have anything else to add before we went ahead and wrap this up with Chance?
I don't. Just thank you for being here. It was a great presentation. Thank you for your advocacy and your passion about health. It's so needed. And if we can address these issues among our people, I think it would solve so many other problems beyond even health. So thank you for doing this, and I'm sure that this won't be the last time we visit, and I know you're going to be working with the communities and through an initiative under Chief and Deputy Chief. So thank you for all that you do. We appreciate you presenting today. Widow.
Hey, thank you all for joining. I hope you got something out of it. It was kind of a high level scratch of the surface. And if I can help out in any way, or personally or whatnot, feel free to reach out. I'm here, I'm available. It's what I want to do. So, don't hesitate if you're, seeing anything, individually or personally that you need some help with, or interested in something, shoot me an email, shoot me a message, find a way to get a hold of me, and I'll do my best to help you out. And if I can't, point you in the right direction to someone who can.
Well, Chance, we do have one last question before we go ahead and end this, from Tanya Wapskini. She said, thank you for sharing. Great information. I would like to see all of Cherokee Nation departments working together to integrate health, preventative programs, culture, language, and heirloom garden. Do you foresee a collaboration?
Yeah, I think it's incredibly important. I think that the concept of wellness and overall health expands so much more beyond, certain just individual initiatives or, individual facilities like Marcoma and things. I think to really change the culture here that's what it's going to take is a collaboration of everyone and a general understanding of where we're at and where we need to go.
And Tanya would like to add that Diabetes Prevention Program offers virtual classes at this time where they discuss traditional foods also.
Absolutely. So yeah, if you're, again, a great resource to tap into if you haven't already, or if that's something you feel like you need. Absolutely.
Well, Chance, we appreciate you coming on with us today, and we look forward to any future developments you're working on.
Hey, I appreciate everybody tuning in, and until next time, have a great day.
Well.